afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Trader Merlin Show. It is your Monday edition. A short week. We'll have no Thursday or Friday show this week, so I'll have my glass of whiskey with you on our Wednesday show. But we will have a Monday, Tuesday, and a Wednesday show. So it should be an exciting one, and it get a little quieter near the tail end of the week, but there might be some nice market moves as many traders take a little bit of time off earlier, and we get less liquidity, therefore markets move. So I hope you had a great weekend out there. I'm going to start off with one of Trump's appointments for political office. Now, for many people looking at it from the outside, it looks like a circus show, particularly with the Secretary of the Education Department. I thought that was just crazy to put. Anyway, we won't even go into that. But I want to go into one that I think is a pretty interesting one that will impact us. So it was eyebrow raising, actually, in one regard, and that was Scott Bessent. So I'll probably pronounce his name wrong. This is a guy who, in all the stuff I've heard about him, becomes very highly regarded. Now, what is his position going to be? He is going to be the Secretary of the Treasury. So he is going to, take over Janet Yellen's job, which is no small task. Janet Yellen, for all the fun I like to make of her, I thought she did a pretty darn good job as an SEC chair and as the Secretary of the Treasury. So who knows what her next task will be, but it looks like we're going to get a changing of the guard there. And I guess it comes down to, what does Scott Bessent, what are his viewpoints? How is he going to impact our markets going forward? And I think it actually looked pretty good. When I saw it, I was like, wow, this is going to be a pretty good one. And I dug a little bit deeper, and I feel even better about it. And then a couple reasons why. Number one is he was a hedge fund manager underneath some pretty big names like George Soros. So he worked for George Soros. He also had his own hedge fund, which I think he still has today, called Key Square Group. Not the biggest in the world, but still a good understanding of macroeconomics, what drives markets. And of course, I think that there'll be an interest on the part of Scott and his team to give market performance, which means this bull market, will probably continue to drive forward. Now, there's going to be some factors as to what drive that market forward. And I think that boils down to Trump's overall plan, the support he gets from Congress and the House of Representatives, and also the Treasury Department. And we can talk about the FOMC later. So, we've heard Trump say, I'm going to, tariff this and put a 2,000% tariff on EV cars coming from Mexico. And when you hear those numbers, you're like, good God, you can't do that in one fell swoop. Now, the good news is, well, I don't know if it's good nor bad. We can take it for what it's worth. But Bessent has been very clear. He's actually pro-tariff. So he's okay with the tariff side of things. I think it's a good way to help balance things out, but not in an aggressive approach. So not like all at once a 2,000% tariff on EV companies made in Mexico, which would, I think, create a lot of hostility between the countries and not necessarily be good for our markets. But do we start at something like a 30% tariff, and then it can tier up based off different criteria, or it grows over time depending on the impact? Which, let's be honest, it's very similar to what the Fed does when it's, let's say, cutting rates. So we were chopping rates really aggressively, and then all of a sudden we went in this raising cycle. So let's say we're down at 0.25% on our Fed funds futures. That's the short end of the yield curve. We're at 0.25, right? Less than 1/4%. And let's say that the Fed looks at this market, the whole ecosystem, and says, we're really struggling. We'd like to get to 5%. In this example, what Trump is saying is, we're going to go from 0.25 to 5% in the next meeting. Boom, just make it happen. That would be such a shock to the system. I don't think it would do any good. It would cause chaos. What Bessent's approach would be is like, look, let's do like the Fed did. We'll raise maybe 50 basis points, and then maybe another, and then go 25 and 25 and see what the impacts are here. To me, that is a great approach to have, as opposed to this, just chop the axe and make it all totalitarian all at once, like Trump would want to do. Or let's slowly scale it in and maybe get to those levels of 2,000%, which I think is not a reasonable number. So that, on one hand, I think is a very good thing. It will create less shock to the system, which none of us really want. I mean, you don't want to see something that's so dramatic that all of a sudden markets go haywire and we have no idea what's going to happen. We like to have some degree of forecasting ability and not just total chaos. Another piece where he might be beneficial, and this is a double-edged sword. I say beneficial because it could definitely benefit specific market segments, and that is rolling back regulations to boost economic growth. Most likely that's going to come in the form of financial regulations, which I think would benefit significantly the major banks and your financial firms. So you're looking at your JP Morgan's, Bank of America's, Wells Fargo's, great. You're also looking at institutional firms, your BlackRock, your Goldman Sachs, Piper Jaffray, these types of firms could benefit from that one. So those are all, great. On one hand, it does spur economic growth, but it does kind of take the reins off of those companies a little bit. And when you do that, historically, that runs into some problem way down the road. Now, that will probably long past the term is over. So who cares, right? That'll be someone else's problem to inherit that down the road. But you remove some of those regulations for financial firms, and that should help these markets thrive. So right away, you look at his front 2 points, which is, let's have a softer approach to tariffs. Let's pull back some of these regulations, particularly on financial firms, because that's his area of expertise. I think we'll see regulations pulled back environmentally as well significantly. But in this case, looking at the financial side, to me, that acts as a financial catalyst. So, we talked at the beginning of the year, maybe even last year, that there was a lot of expectations that 2025 would be that bearish year, that year where all of a sudden things start to fall apart, the train comes off the rails. Now, you look at some of the appointments, it does look like there are pieces being put in place to keep that train rolling. It doesn't mean it has to keep rolling, just means that there's some pieces put in place to keep this economic machine going. Now, the other piece that I thought was interesting, I'm trying to remember all this stuff, is tough off the top of my head. A 333, yeah, right? I love the name, Beth Bezos. That's good. He says it's hilarious that Trump picked a Soros guy, right? This diehard Democrat supporter in Bezos, and you pick his right-hand man. And not only that, and again, I didn't want to bring this up because it's I think it might offend a lot of people, and I apologize. This is just a fact. I didn't expect Trump to pick somebody who was, Bessent is married to a male, and so he's obviously gay, and they have 2 children. And you look at conservative values, which Trump says he is strongly behind conservative values, and that kind of flies in the face of it a little bit. But hey, great, that didn't make a difference to me. I just want the best person for the position. Do what you got to do. But I thought that was kind of interesting that Trump would go that route. So he's got this 3-3-3 philosophy, which would be good for us. So if we look at the first 3, I need to bring this page up here so I can see exactly where we are right now. Let's go to U.S. debt clock. U.S. debt clock. The first 3 in the 3-3-3 approach is reducing the deficit by 3% by 2023. Now, I'm seeing mixed things because the first part was saying he wants to get the deficit spending reduced just down to 3%, which we're nowhere near there. If you look at federal debt as opposed to GDP ratio, we're at 122%. This doesn't have the deficit spending, I don't believe. Let me see if the deficit percentage is on here. No, it's not on here. So obviously wanting to get deficit spending down. And remember, spending is part of the thing that spurs the economy and causes it to grow even more. So depending on where those cuts are coming from, that might be a slight negative impact. Yep. Big Eb says, is Bessent the guy that Elon was against? Yeah, Elon tweeted out something to the extent of, this Bessent guy is just a same old thing. It's the same old cut, paste, rinse, wash, repeat type of person in office. That's not going to facilitate change. So certainly a little bit of a conflict there. But look, I think if Elon truly does have the power to make some changes with this Doge position, there's a lot of other people that are probably much less qualified for their positions and aren't doing a lot of work. Get them out of there. Let's start there and then work our way back up. But yeah, Elon was definitely vocal. I tweeted out about this guy saying he's not a good choice because he's just the same old crony guy. Is what it is. There'll always be naysayers. And Elon, because Elon says that doesn't necessarily mean this is a bad guy. So the first 3 was get deficit 3% of deficit by 2028. Second one was get our GDP economic growth up to 3% or get it at 3%. So where are we today? Let me bring up your trading view and we'll go to Forex Factory actually. And this is the preliminary GDP. Right now we're at 2.8%. On this Wednesday, we actually have our next GDP announcement. And I just wanted to show you, kind of going historically, when you look over that 3% line, which is where this horizontal, let me put the horizontal line on this bad boy so you can see it. Right, I can't click on it, but there's 2.9. So just slightly above that is going to be your 3%. And you can see that for the most part, we've been staying, slightly underneath it, a few pops above it, but anything above 3%, I think, is viewed as good growth for such a big economy as the United States. So that would be a good sign. That's his second 3. And then the third piece, this one is interesting. And I think that this is kind of a Soros idea, is 3 million new barrels a day of oil, which basically opens up the doorway, to me anyway, of drill, 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 frack, 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 right? Just get as much production as we can here in the United States. And, on one hand, I think that that's great. I think it's job creation. I think it's, good for economic growth. On the other side, maybe you could classify me as a little bit of a tree hugger, but I'm a little bit concerned that when you roll back regulations on what these firms may need to do to get up and running, to look at environmental concerns and contamination of water tables and wildlife destruction, I'm a little concerned there. You're basically saying, hey, Wild West guys, go drill. We want massive new increases in oil production, and we're going to roll back some of the quality controls, safety checks, etc., that you had to adhere to in the past to make it easier for you. That's the only part of this I don't like. Is I'd like to, if you're going to put in that much more oil production, I think you should have some regulatory oversight to make sure these guys aren't cutting corners, which could cause environmental disasters, as we've seen many times throughout the course of history. I'm not a big fan of regulation and government controls. I'm more of a laissez-faire kind of guy. But when you have capitalism and greed involved, it's very easy for someone to come in and say, well, we could route it around that water, that body of water there, which houses all these fish and ecosystems, or just run the pipe right through the water because no one cares, no one's checking, and if whatever happens to the water, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I just want the oil. That type of stuff worries me. Doesn't that exact same concern apply to financial institutions too? Yes, it does, Liz. And I guess maybe I'm being a little hypocritical because I guess I'm more concerned to the irreparable damage to the environment. Maybe not irreparable, but I think it would take a lot longer to clean up an environmental disaster than a financial disaster. So if we get lax regulation for, let's say, lending, or keep that reserve requirement for banks at 0%, and change some of the rules that allow banks to take on more risk, what happens is we may have a systemic failure, and we may have some bankruptcies, maybe over-leveraged banks like we had with Lehman Brothers, right, and other firms. I think that's easier to recover from a financial disaster as opposed to an ecological one. So I'm concerned about the ecology, environment destruction, and how that impacts the water table and people that live around those surrounding areas more so than I am about a bank collapsing. But they're both concerning, to be sure. Absolutely. So what else did I want to say for this guy? Oh, and the last piece here, which, we look at the table on how all the people at the table are changing, right? If this is the Last Supper, there's like no one going to be at the same dinner here next year. And I still didn't find this graphic for you, which is called Operation Choke Point, which I will get to. I apologize, I've been busy. It shows the people that were railroading cryptocurrency and just trying to cancel it, get it out. They're disappearing in droves. Now, Janet Yellen hasn't been openly against it, but she hasn't really been talk much about cryptocurrencies either. I think she'd be on the more slightly against cryptocurrencies because obviously as a Secretary of Treasury, she is more concerned about the stability of the US dollar. Now, Scott Bessent has said, I am pro-crypto. He definitely sees crypto and Bitcoin being a viable means of transaction. He is pro-crypto. And again, having someone at the Treasury Department who's pro-crypto, that may push this agenda of creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve at the U.S. Treasury Department for the U.S. government. For me, that is a huge thing. Massive. And again, if the U.S. government says, if Trump comes out and says, we're starting a strategic Bitcoin reserve for the United States, that means that we will actually be buying Bitcoin as a government, we'll be hoarding it as a government, and encouraging other governments to do the same. So people like myself are going, yes, please start a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And if you guys think I'm embellishing a little too much and trying to make it sound so rosy for the U.S., there are already bills ready from Cynthia Loomis and others that are first couple weeks, pass those through, get those signed. Let's start a strategic Bitcoin reserve for the U.S. government. It looks more and more likely every day, which is I think would be a very positive thing. The government would be holding an asset that, based off of math, should continue to appreciate in value over time. And the government essentially becomes like a MicroStrategy. They print money, they buy Bitcoin, drives the price of Bitcoin up. They print more money, they buy more Bitcoin, price of Bitcoin goes up. And those of us who hold Bitcoin are rejoicing here. All right, enough with that one. So that's who Scott Bessent is. An appointment that I was like, right on. I could get behind this guy. I think he represents a lot of values that I'm behind. I think it could be a pretty good position. Now we won't run into all of them because it turns into a political show, and I don't want this show to be that. But this one definitely impacts our financial markets. And all in all, I think it's a rather bullish pick for the economy and our markets going forward. All right, big ups at the bond market thinks inflation is less of a threat with Bessent. Is that due to the less aggressive tariffs? Yes. So, yeah, bond markets feel like he also believes in having a weak dollar. That's one other thing I did not mention here. So he is pro crushing the value of the dollar. Why is that a good thing? Well, when you have a weak dollar, it generally increases economic growth. So let's go look at that. What happened to the dollar today? And of course, the dollar, this is what happened over the weekend. You see a pretty big down day today, right? Given the nice rally we've had in that dollar index, today was down 0.55%. The belief is if he does take office, he's going to push to weaken the value of the dollar. And therefore, what that does is that brings down the long-term rates of bonds because if the dollar is cheaper, less people are going to want to hold U.S. dollars, etc. So it is a piece that definitely pushed that market down today. You look at the 10-year. You had a pretty big gap down. I mean, you don't see big gaps like this typically, and I think this was largely in part due to Bessent and his appointment, or potential appointment for office. But we saw a significant drop today. If you look at from where we closed at to where we are right now, down 2.88% just for over the weekend. So pretty big drop there, but yeah, definitely big gap. I think the markets definitely view him as less of a threat for inflation. I think that the dollar is a big factor in that one as well. But, when you weaken the dollar, typically means that you're printing more money, and I can play devil's advocate here. You're printing more money to push the value of the dollar down. More money printed means more money chasing the same amount of goods and services, and that could theoretically drive up inflation. So I'm torn. I'm torn here with regards to his impact on inflation. But yeah, he's one that they believe would have an impact on inflation. All right. Let me run through the other stories for the day. So there was a settlement. Rivian is accused of poaching employees from Tesla to get intellectual property rights and all kind of trade secrets, etc. From my understanding, that was settled today, and you saw today a great pop in Rivian. And by the way, I'll fill you in a little bit on the weirdness that goes on in my head. I eat, sleep, drink markets, right? Well, last night, I'm laying there and I'm asleep. And of course, my options expired on my Rivian. I sell weekly call options against my Rivian position. And I had 1150 calls that expired Friday, of course, kept that premium. And, we were to $10.20 or something when we closed on Friday. I'm like, all right, fine, great, no problem. I'm laying there last night. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning. I wake up and I'm like, man, did Rivian just jump to 15%? Because I kept thinking in my mind, Rivian's up 10 to 20%. I can't wait to sell calls when the market opens. 10 to 20%. Can't wait to sell calls. I'm like, this is weird. I went back to sleep. And I woke up this morning and I was like, man, I had a little bit of a premonition there. I need to write down the lotto numbers when I see them in my sleep, although it's hard to remember all those lotto numbers. But anyway, we were up 13% on Rivian today. I did sell calls, and I was going to sell the 12s. You guys know last week I sold the 1150s. I collected a good amount of premium. I just went all the way out here to the 1250s. So I collected 17 cents on the 1250s, which isn't a lot, but it's like an extra $1,000 for the week. Those options expiring this Friday. So I got about a 1.5% rate of return extra on my position for 5 days. If it doesn't rally up there, no problem. Those will expire on Friday. So we'll see what happens. But that was one that was made today. And again, there's more drama here now, this is obviously the Rivian settlement is the picture I was conveying here. But I don't know if you guys saw the story that Gavin Newsom, because Trump is saying he's going to take away this $750 or $7,500 tax credit for EVs, that Gavin Newsom says, well, as California, we will offer it independent of a federal tax credit, and we're not going to offer it on Teslas. So, I mean, now we're getting this tit-for-tat, garbage, bureaucracy, political stuff I just can't stand. Who knows what kind of impact that will have. And Elon Musk tweeted out right away. He's like, I'm the only one of the EV companies who's actually making my EVs in California, and you're not going to give me the tax credit? Boy, Elon Musk's the type of guy that just say, fine, I'll pull everything out of California and watch our revenue drop significantly. So anyway, more politics, just the craziness of it all. But we did have a really nice pop in Rivian today. I didn't go out and look at some of the other ones like NIO. Yeah, nothing really happened with NIO. What's Go EV doing? Is that thing dead yet? Oh, man. Back to 40 cents. Poor guy. Oh, sad. And then Tesla. All right, so Tesla had a pretty big bearish engulfing pattern today. A lot of people talking about a pullback here in Tesla, and would not surprise me to see one coming, right? Fundamentally, Tesla hasn't changed their business over the past couple months, yet they've had a monstrous rally up from $200 all the way up to 360. So pretty impressive run here for Tesla. Big Ev, that's a good one. I love it. Big Ev says, of course, our great state of California is $70 billion in the hole. Where does he get that money? Oh, well, he'll just, I don't know, take it from police services up in San Francisco. I don't know. We'll find it from somewhere. We'll just make it. Maybe we need a California strategic Bitcoin reserve. After all, the Silk Road Bitcoin that the U.S. Marshal Service was actually seized in California. Maybe we get to keep that. No, just kidding. All right, so that was one extra piece. Here's another piece I'm going to get to, and I'll do some markets and go into whatever questions you guys have. This is interesting. So we talked last week about Michael Saylor, the selling of those convertible bonds and raising $3 billion. I guess it ended up being $5.4 billion after additions and added-ons. So I created this graphic. I like this one. It's funny. I actually said, create a picture of Merlin Rothfeld with his finger on his chin, looking inquisitive and confused about something. And that's the picture. So apparently, I've got a full head of hair now. It's not as gray, but I really need to work on that wrinkle cream. It's just a bad picture of me. Anyway, I put where's the Bitcoin? Because one of the things I went into the weekend with a big smile on my face for is I thought Friday we would break 100,000 on Bitcoin. I was almost certain of it by the trajectory and the way we're going, and knowing that Saylor's coming in buying $3 billion worth of Bitcoin. Turned out to be 5.4. Where's the Bitcoin? There is no way possible, other than one, which I will give you a hypothesis, maybe conspiracy theory here, that you could go out and buy on the open market 50,000+ Bitcoin and not move the market. So let's go look at the spot market here. And again, spot market, you're like, well, he didn't trade on those exchanges. He doesn't need to, because it works off of arbitrage, meaning these exchanges here would be doing a bunch of trades back and forth if there's imbalances between Bitfinex and Coinbase, Kraken, etc. So let's just go look at the 5-minute chart, and I want to go look over the weekend. So let's go to Friday. Where are we at? Friday was what, the 22nd? Yeah, the 22nd. So right here I have the weekend through right now. And you're telling me that at some point, actually, what was stated was that it started between the 18th. So the statement from MicroStrategy was that between the 18th and the 24th, MicroStrategy had bought another $5.4 billion worth of Bitcoin. Now, you could make the argument that maybe it's this impact in here where we saw it really rallying on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but it just seems weird. I felt like the ink wasn't even dry on the deal, like they would need to wait a couple of days to get clarity and get the money in hand. Maybe I'm mistaken. Either way, I find it suspect that you could buy that much Bitcoin on the open market. It's like 53,000 Bitcoin, right? There's just no way you're not going to move price. And just to help everybody here understand, let me go to Coinbase and log into their platform right now. Obviously, they're not going to be using this exact platform, but it does give you an idea of the look. Oh, 1 second. Let me go back to myself so I can log in here. I don't know why it kicked me out. Let me log in here. Hold on. I want to show you the level 2 screen so you can see the market depth on this. I want you to be able to look at exactly what the liquidity is at any moment in time, and it'll blow your mind. 7, 8. I didn't just log in here real quick. All right. So let's go over here to Coinbase Advanced. Now, this depth chart right here, you can see that, you see up here, this number right here says 150 Bitcoin. That means that if I bought 150 Bitcoin right now in one click of a button, it would go from $93,267 up to over $95,000. So I would impact this almost $2,000 just by buying 150 Bitcoin. Now, unfortunately, I can't zoom out any more on this. I can't go out to see like bigger levels. I just won't let me zoom out that much. I can only, oh, maybe I can. There we go. So here we go. You guys see right here, Coinbase, there's 4,000. If I bought right now 4,800 Bitcoin, I would drive the price instantly up to $163,000 on Coinbase. Does everybody see that? Does that make sense? Just give me a simple yes or no. So something's fishy here. It doesn't make sense. Here's your wall at 100,000. At Bitcoin, on Coinbase, if you bought 1,400 Bitcoin, you would blow through that wall at 100,000 and just keep on going. So like they bought 53,000 Bitcoin. If you bought that from Coinbase by itself, you're probably looking at $300,000 on Bitcoin. It makes no sense. So I have this burning question in my mind, which is, where's the Bitcoin? So here's what I think happens. And this just makes me distrust the whole system even more. Quite often, you can buy something, quote unquote, buy something, and your broker may not actually go and buy it for you. They may look at their inventory and just make a ledger entry. Says, okay, Ken here bought 100 shares of Apple. We're not going to go to the market right now because we've got a big inventory. If Ken wants some Apple shares and to sell them immediately, we'll just take them from our big pool. And I have this gut feeling that that's what's happening. The question is, who's custodian? How are they buying their Bitcoin? And who's the custodian of those Bitcoins? So I've heard that Coinbase is one of the custodians. I've heard Fidelity and a couple other names, but nothing's really that transparent. I think in their financial statements, they talked about Coinbase, Fidelity, and another one, Exos or something like that. But are they actually buying the Bitcoin? Or is it just simply they look at Fidelity and say, hey, we want to have another 20,000. Fidelity goes, okay, you got 20,000 more. And we'll just, if you need it at some point when you sell it, we have to go find those somewhere, and that's when the problem arises. It's kind of this this weird way that banks lend out your money, right? When you deposit your money, that money is lent out to other people, and when you go to demand your money from the bank, then all of a sudden the bank has to go find those assets. So if there's a big run on the bank's insolvent and in trouble. I have this sneaking suspicion that that's what's going on with these exchanges. I have this feeling that the way that MicroStrategy bought it, it said, yeah, we want to buy 53,000 Bitcoin through a variety of different exchanges. Those exchanges simply said, okay, you have it. And they did not go to the open market. Because there is just literally no way on this great green earth that you could go out there and buy Bitcoin and not impact this market. Let me go out here to Binance and see. I'll log into Binance accounts just to see what Binance looks like. 1 second. Just seems very, 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 very suspect that that you could buy that much and not move these markets. It just seems very odd to me, and it's a bummer because I was firmly believing that this was going to just rip this weekend because I knew they were going to buy it this weekend. Yet it barely moved this market at all. So let me put in this code, and we'll look at what it looks like on Binance. Remember, Binance has much more liquidity than Coinbase. It's the most liquid one out there. So let's go to trade. We'll go to spot trading. And here's your BTC. Right? So there's Bitcoin. This is on a daily time frame. And it doesn't give me a depth chart. Oh, there it does give me a depth chart. So there's their depth chart. Let's go and just zoom out here and see. I'm going to do the big picture. Yeah, there's almost no liquidity here. None. If you look at here, if you bought 34 Bitcoin, you would move their price up to $116,000. So clearly no liquidity over here either. So where did they get this confirmed 53,000 Bitcoin and not move the market? Something's wrong. Something is clearly wrong. There's no way on earth you could buy $5.4 billion worth of Bitcoin and not spike it up over 100,000. So something goofy is going on. Just want to throw it out there. I don't know what it is. I'll keep digging and see what the conspiracy theorists say, but there's just no way. Anybody here who trades Bitcoin and understands the liquidity issues of Bitcoin, you can't go and buy 50,000 Bitcoin like this. It's not going to be that easy. And if you did, it's going to surge it up through the roof. And it just didn't happen. So something's wrong there. Let me see what you guys say here. Do we know if MicroStrategy has completed the purchase? Yes. So MicroStrategy did make an announcement that they did complete the purchase between November 18th and 24th. So as of Sunday night, that transaction's done. A little 6-day window there. They bought $5.4 billion worth of Bitcoin. Impossible. Impossible to do it and not move that market. So where does MicroStrategy buy their coins from? Good question, Lisa. I know they custody some of them at Coinbase. They custody some of them at Fidelity. I've been digging, trying to find out exactly how they buy their Bitcoin. My guess is they're using someone else's Bitcoin. It's like your bank, right? The bank says they have, let's say the bank has, $1 million worth of deposits on hand. Well, what happens is if I deposit $100,000, they're loaning that out to somebody so that they borrow that $100,000 and let's say they loan that to Chio, right? Chio does a $100,000 loan and Chio deposits that money in the bank. Now the bank says, oh, I've got $200,000 worth. No, you don't. You have the same $100,000 that's been just moved into someone else's account, but you're counting it as 2 entries. And then they take that deposit and lend it out and lend it out. So next thing you know, my initial $100,000 deposit is worth millions of dollars on the books at the bank. But really, it's still the $100,000. I think that's what's happening here. I'm not sure. Very strange. Maybe the transaction is not yet completed. No, it's completed. And, this is why you should take self-custody. This is why you should bring it onto a ledger, a Trezor. What I would love to see Saylor do, and this I think would be a very interesting move, is if Michael Saylor moved his crypto into cold storage away from the exchanges, then you'd really see what he held. Because right now I'm told that he owns 300 plus thousand Bitcoin, right? Exactly, Mammon, fractional reserve Bitcoin. It's not really the Bitcoin of it, it's the institutions and how they play their shenanigans with inventory and what they hold and just lending it out to other people without actually going to the open market. Because if anyone here is unclear about it, let me know, but there is no way you could go to a market and just buy $1 billion worth of, even 1 billion. You couldn't buy $1 billion worth of Bitcoin without this thing absolutely screaming to the upside. I mean, literally, if I bought 34 Bitcoin, I move this price up to $116,000. That's insane. And if I do it over here at Coinbase, if I bought 4,000 Bitcoin, all right, and what would that be? All right, let's get the calculation out here. So 48.59 times, we are currently at 93,000. That would only be 451 million. So with $451 million purchase on Coinbase.com right now, I would move the price of Bitcoin up almost 70%. I'd move it up to $166,000 with that order. And these guys bought 8 times that much. There's just no way. I don't get it. There's a game afoot here, man. Something is rotten in that game. Either one of 3 things. Number 1, MicroStrategy is lying and nothing happened. That could be, but you're a publicly traded company and that stuff's supposed to be tracked. You file all kinds of financial forms. Although, let's be fair, Michael Saylor in the past has gotten himself into trouble. So that's choice number 1, is that MicroStrategy is completely lying. Number 2 is, actually, there might be only 2, is that the exchanges where they are buying these crypto from are actually just a brokerage firm that's just shuffling people's accounts around saying, yep, you've now got an extra 53,000 Bitcoin in your account. Good, done, good for you. The way you, like, if this is truly the way it's working, Michael Saylor could do something dramatic. He would never do this, but he could. He could say, I demand to sell all my Bitcoin at market right now. Because then this firm would have to find the liquidity. They'd have to find these Bitcoin, which they've been borrowing and from other people's accounts, and then put them in their account to sell. That would cause a monumental crash. So, I don't know. Those are the 2 outcomes here. Either MicroStrategy's lying, or we're getting kind of shenanigans on the financial side with how these firms are handling customer accounts and ledger entries of who owns what Bitcoin and just moving it around like a bank does with fractional reserve banking. So I really can't come up with another theory. Been scratching my head all weekend going, no way. When I saw the article that definitively the $5.4 billion was purchased, it's done, it's over with, that's insane. And no movement. I mean, just minimal movement. They don't want their transactions being reported or public. Well, but they have to disclose, if you're holding reserve assets like that, you have to disclose what you're holding. That's right. It's part of being a publicly traded company. So let's see. Maybe the transactions are completed. Okay, so and based on what you're saying, how is the U.S. government going to use Bitcoin as a reserve? So basically, I like that, Lisa. What the government would do, and this is what Cynthia Lummis is proposing. Cynthia Lummis is saying, and she's one of the senators who's co-signed the bill, she's saying that by the government holding Bitcoin, which based off demand factors should continue to go up, based off supply and demand factors should continue to go up. So if the government takes $1 billion of printed money today and buys $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, that's going to push the price of Bitcoin up. So it will no longer be worth $1 billion, it'll be worth $1.5 billion. So we'll be creating wealth for ourselves in an asset that the world perceives has value. Therefore, it's better than gold because it's easier to store, easier to transfer, easier to move, and it has definitively fixed supply. So I think that's why Cynthia Lummis is the one that's, or is one of several that's pushing for that transparency. But that's how the government would have a value-backed asset on their books as opposed to gold. It's just... we have a gold reserve, we have oil reserves, why not have a Bitcoin reserve? Something that's going to go up over time. Let's see. Is there a relation between this and MicroStrategy going down so much? So I wouldn't say that's a direct relationship, but what you're seeing is that Citron article that came out, which was just slamming MicroStrategy. And by the way, I sold puts on MicroStrategy today, expiring Friday. I'll tell you more about that in just a second. But Citron Research is basically calling this a Ponzi scheme and saying it's going to come crashing down. I don't know if I'd call it a Ponzi scheme. We talked about this on Friday. It has some Ponzi-esque features, but it's fully open. It's completely transparent. They're raising money to buy Bitcoin. They make no qualms about it. So that's above board. So the reason I think you're seeing is just short interest. Remember, MicroStrategy was trading at a premium of about 3x to the price of Bitcoin, but it's a leveraged Bitcoin play. They're being able to buy more Bitcoin with leveraged money. So Citron said this is a fraud, it's going to come crashing down, yada, 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 and more short interest piled into this. So I think that's the reason you saw that big sell-off on Thursday and another sell-off here today. Obviously, this coincides with the sell-off that's happening in Bitcoin today, down around 5% on the day. Let's see. It takes too long for a big check to be cleared by the bank. Yeah, and let alone $5.4 billion, right? $5.4 billion. Why does Anthony Palmiano say Bitcoin is more stable at higher prices? That's a good question. I don't know if I would necessarily agree that it's more stable at higher prices. I think that as time goes on, Bitcoin becomes more stable because of spread out users. The more people that hold Bitcoin, the more stable it becomes. When you have Bitcoin in the hands of just a few institutions, MicroStrategy, BlackRock, and the ability for them to unload all at once, that creates the extreme volatility. I mean, imagine, right now, there's a few of you who have a whole coin. Well, let's just imagine in a futuristic world. Let me go over here and pull this one up for you. Let's say you've got 21 million Bitcoin. There's 21 million. And you divide that by, let's say, half the world population. Not the whole, the half the world's population. That's 4 billion. Right? Isn't it 8 billion? I think the population right now is 8 billion. So there's 4 billion people. That means that if everybody in the earth had if half of the world's population had 0.005 Bitcoin, not even close to a whole Bitcoin, then it would probably be one of the most stable instruments on the face of the planet. Why? Because it's just so spread out, not one person can impact it. Right now, what you're getting, I think, is a power grab of people trying to get as much as they can, because once we get adoption and the world may start to use Bitcoin going forward, they'll have much more power. So I don't necessarily agree with a higher Bitcoin price makes it more stable. I think it actually adds to volatility. It's the dilution of Bitcoin that makes it more stable. In the hands of more people, less probability of them selling all at the same time. So it gets more stable that way. Let's see. Great questions. Peter Zion feels Bitcoin constitutes monetary inflation where everyone later pays an inflationary price to buy it, which causes a Ponzi scheme effect. Thoughts? I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think that it caused an inflationary. I mean, obviously you have an inflationary price of the asset itself, but if you're buying it, I mean, what you're saying is essentially that knowing that the asset is limited in supply and demand is increasing, that if you buy it and encourage others to buy it, that you're creating the inflationary price of that asset. Okay, that's true. And you're going to make it much more expensive as time goes on. So, sure. I don't know if I'd necessarily call it a Ponzi scheme effect. It's just demand of an asset, demand of something becoming so large that, yeah, you know that if you buy it, unless something breaks, it's going to be worth more down the road. So why not just buy it? I actually paid for dinner this weekend with Bitcoin. It's kind of fun. I did a Bitcoin transaction at a Shabu restaurant. Paid for my dinner with Shabu. All right, what else do I have here? Financial firms being shady. Well, who'd have thunk, right? Say it ain't so. Yeah, Big Eb's right. The U.S. government does have about 200,000 Bitcoin. That's the U.S. Marshal Service owns that. But yeah, government. Chio, can you see it in one Bitcoin address where you show us earlier this year that some Bitcoin addresses have not moved for years? So MicroStrategy does not have an address that they could show us. That's one of the things I kind of look at MicroStrategy and makes me a bit nervous about it. Because if I was MicroStrategy, I would make it very clear, there's my address. Look at it. We own everything there. However, when you do that, you have one point of failure. So if I have a Bitcoin address, I run one Bitcoin address and something happens, I lose my private keys or it gets hacked, that's systemic risk. And at this point, a publicly traded company like MicroStrategy, I believe, has some security provisions that they can't do that. Now, maybe you spread it around to 4 or 5 different cold storage devices, but I think it would make sense if I own the company to say, yeah, we just bought 5.4 billion. There it is. That's why we like it, because everybody can see what we're doing. At this point, I have to take it at face value that they're being honest and transparent. And honestly, I don't know. I don't know if I trust that they're being honest and transparent. I find it impossible. Impossible. I think it'd be easier for you to pick the winning numbers in the lotto than to try to buy $5.4 billion worth of Bitcoin and not move the market. There's just no way. There's not that much on exchanges. 53,000 Bitcoin, it may not seem like a lot, but those that are in crypto, you understand how massive that is. You can't just find it sitting somewhere, right? It takes a while to amass that much. Let's see what else we got. I'd rather use gold or silver as a reserve. I'd rather use Bitcoin as a reserve, and the main reason is put it on an address and let me look at it. As a citizen, let me know my government actually has what they say they have. Because Margaret says I'd rather use gold or silver, and I know why you're saying that, Margaret. You're saying it because gold and silver are tangible. I can hold it. It's something real, and Bitcoin's not real. Bitcoin is a virtual asset. I can't argue that. I can't argue that gold and silver are tangible and I can hold them. I have issues with trust, and I think many of you do as well. I do not trust my government when they say, oh, we've got $10 billion worth of gold. Show it to me. And they'll say, oh, here's a picture of it. Is it photoshopped? Are those lead bars dipped in gold paint? I have no idea. You could make fake gold bars and say, oh yeah, come tour Fort Knox. There it is. It's right behind that glass, that barred wall is all our gold. It's fake. I have no idea. I don't trust my government to be honest about their actual holdings. Now, if you showed me an actual Bitcoin address and said, that's ours, you can watch our purchases go in and out of that address, I trust you because I know that address. That address can't be hacked. The network itself won't allow for fake Bitcoin in there. So if you have that address, you own it. So I'd much rather have Bitcoin. I think it's honesty. I think it's truth, but I need to see the account, right? News is interesting, but just a catalyst for price action. It's price valuation more than just Michael Saylor, even if it has a moderate influence. Yeah, the news is certainly the piece. And part of my mind was thinking, when this announcement was coming out, they were selling these convertible bonds on MicroStrategy. When was that? Right? Was that back here? Was that back in October when they because they don't just like issue it and the next day they're full. They have to come up with legal documents and make sure the contracts are all correct. And maybe this run we saw here, and maybe I'm just being ignorant, maybe this run up from November 1st to what we saw that peak on November 21st, maybe that was the expectation that they were going to buy it. Or maybe they were already buying with money they didn't have. I don't know. Or maybe this is the market trying to buy it ahead of MicroStrategy so they could sell it to MicroStrategy at those higher prices. I don't know. It just seems fishy to me that you buy that much and it barely moves the market. I find that very, very odd. Market says, I believe that it will crash because they use too much leverage. That's a very real possibility. It's definitely a possibility. If you have your main buyer who's using borrowed money, if this falls to a certain point, there is a liquidation price for their Bitcoin. If that does happen, then you could see some issues here with MicroStrategy. Now, before I get too lost in your comments here, which are great, I love all the comments. I did sell today, expiring Friday. I sold the 340 strikes on MicroStrategy. Let's go here, put the 340s on there. So less than, not $3,400, $340. There we go. So that red line on your screen represents the strike price of the MicroStrategy puts that I sold expiring Friday. I sold the 340 strike, and I'll put a vertical line on here as well. The premium collected was $7 per contract, so that was a pretty nice premium there. Let's go to this, get the exact date, Friday the 29th. So I've got between this current red bar and the vertical red line till stay above $340. And who knows, that's a risky trade. I mean, the premium right now for MicroStrategy, as many of you have seen, is significant. So I sold several of these today. We'll see how it all pans out. Lisa had the 340 last week. Today I sold the 317.50s for this Friday. Yeah, and that's why I did it, Margaret. I did it because the demand zone right around 340. Just the starting this big move. I still think that we'll have a little bit of difficulty getting below, let's say, 375. Lisa, I love it. Lisa says you sold the 317.50s. I mean, look how far down that 317.50 is. I mean, that's below this demand zone, or right at the very, very bottom of it, and you're probably still making over 1%. I mean, there's just juicy premium on MicroStrategy. Just be really careful, guys. I don't want to see anybody get wiped out on this one. So if you are dabbling in it, don't go all in. Just do a little bit of it. But yeah, the premium is pretty impressive. And there's a lot of negative press out there. So those of you selling puts, there is definitely a good chance of you getting filled. If I got filled at 340, I just keep selling calls because I'm pretty sure Bitcoin's going to keep on going up and up and up. Wow, I sold the 340s and I got $7, and you sold the 317s and you got $7.25. Dang it! How'd you beat me by so much? It's just timing, right? Timing is everything. If we look at the time of day, what did you do it like right in the morning? I did it back in here, so you might have done it early this morning. Great. I'm not focusing on any strikes higher than the mid 200s. Oof. You know what? You could probably still get some down there at the 200, but you're not going to get a lot of premium. If you go distant, if you give yourself some time, you could probably get some. You're not going to get much down here at the 200 strike, at least not today. All right, let me see. What else did I have on here? Yep, that was all I had to discuss today. Let me run through our top 7 markets here, and then I'll go to the listener questions. This was not meant to be a full-on crypto show, but it seems like where we've headed lately. Obviously, the correction was bound to come at some point. We got our tiptoe above the 100,000 mark on Friday's session, and now sold off. I'm really shocked about this one. Could we see it could drop down to 87.6? Sure. You have this rally, consolidation, and breakout. You've got some unfilled gaps here also, which make me a little bit nervous. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he's like, "Oh, it's going to get down to 60." I don't think we're going to get down to $60 or 60,000 on Bitcoin. I just think it's a little too far, given how much interest, money, politics has now fueled the crypto surge. But nothing is impossible. If it does, I'll probably look to acquire more and maybe get to that holding amount of Bitcoin that I've been trying to get to for quite some time. Let me see. Let's go with my 250 put expiring this week and taking another trade next week. Not focusing on strikes. Sorry, I'm just reading through the comments here. Playing MicroStrategy since 2021. Yeah, a long time. You're a seasoned vet here. Cool. What were the other ones there? Will MicroStrategy end up like FTX? I see a lot of issues. No, they won't have issues like FTX. FTX was trading customers' accounts without any approval. Things were real shady. No clue what was going on behind the scenes. MicroStrategy's been very transparent. They have not tried to hide anything. They're saying, we're selling these bonds or giving you convertible bonds or issuing debt to buy Bitcoin. Making it very clear. Now, at a certain point, I think some people are right, which would be, at a certain point, MicroStrategy will probably run out of people who are willing to buy those bonds because they don't see as much upside potential right now. And that could cause a significant drop in the value of MicroStrategy. But as long as they don't liquidate those Bitcoin holdings long term, they'll be fine. Because again, I'm a believer that the price of Bitcoin will continue to go up because of demand factors and decreasing supply. So Bitcoin was your ugly one this week. It was a pretty exciting weekend, actually. There was a lot of movement going on. Like some of the coins I was looking at are up 30-40% in a day. I mean, my Polkadot, I was just shocked. Polkadot's done nothing for eons, and all of a sudden, just surging. Love it. Gold, plummeting as well, down 3.45%. Still looking decent, although it did not make a new high here. So today's action is definitely a big sign of weakness in the grand scheme of things for gold. If you look at crude oil, also down 3.23%, but has not broken those levels we've talked about. So it just feels like we're compressing on gold here, crude oil. Lower highs, same lows. Over time, that equates to prices moving down. And maybe this does have a little bit to do with the appointment of Scott Bessent, who's like, drill, baby, drill. So you got Trump, drill, baby, drill. You got Bessent is going to say, drill, baby, drill from oil production, rollback regulations. That should put more downward pressure on crude oil. Dollar index, we already talked about this one. We did hit our 108 mark on Friday. Did a nice about face. We're currently at 106.88 for the dollar index. Bottom line is, if you plan on traveling somewhere, now's the time to do it. All right, given the forces that are coming into office in January, there could definitely be a pretty significant push down in the value of that U.S. dollar. If you look at when Trump was elected, it was 2016, right? Was it? It was December 2016. I think he took office in 2017, right? Look at the value of your dollar. Went from 103 just in the next year down to 88. So it was definitely a push down. It did manage to creep back up here, but I'm pretty sure it was 2016 is when he won the election, took office in 2017. And let's see, moving on up. That was the dollar index. We talked about that 10-year having a pretty quick little drop, but all in all, a new picture is kind of formed here. And I think this one's interesting. It's this kind of this channel that's been drifting drifting down since October of 2023. Now I'll draw some lines on here to hopefully show it. It's gonna be a little off there. But there's your upper band of that channel, and then if you look what's going on right now with the bottom end of this channel, you have this kind of pattern that's been stuck in, and we'll see if it continues to drift in that channel. But I'm a believer of a pullback coming and then higher yield. But again, so much stuff is changing right now, guys. It's just crazy. It's hard to put a finger on exactly what's going to happen. Now, a nice positive spin for today was the broad market indexes. NASDAQ was up 0.15%, all in all looking pretty decent, although it's well off of its highs, right? So we had an update for the market, but not as up as it was during the day. S&P, same thing, up 0.33. You've got this spinning top Harami formation right at this all-time, at the ATH up here. Love that. And then Russell 2000 broke through this most recent high. Bullishness persisting on that Russell. And again, lowering the yields, a weak dollar could certainly help the Russell, although you got to go back here. Let me put on a weekly here. Let's go back to that W. Okay, and I want to get the exact high point. So that high was 2,460.8, and today we hit 2,477, all-time high. ATH, love it. And closing at the all-time high as well, because we closed today at 2,451, so pretty impressive. And that's it. That's my top markets out there. What did I do? Yeah, I did MicroStrategy, and I sold the 1150 strikes against my Rivian. Those are the only two I made today. Did I have any others? No, that was it. So those are the only two I put on today. We'll see if I find anything more interesting tomorrow. And that's it. There's our 55-minute show. Surprising. I thought we'd be a short show today, and that conversation went long. So Scott Bessent, excited about it. I think it'll probably really be bullish for our economy. So, position yourself there. I think you're looking at bigger profits for energy companies. One thing that we'll talk about maybe tomorrow if you guys want to is the precipitous decline in defense stocks. They have been plummeting lately. Really, really significant drops in defense companies, which was one of my sectors which I thought would do well under a Trump administration. So that was probably the only one that has gone the other direction of anticipated. We'll see how that one pans out. So if you guys have any comments, questions, feedback, things you want me to cover, email me at tradermerlin@gmail.com or put your comments down below the YouTube videos. I did not get to those today. I will do the YouTube video stuff tomorrow, so I'm a little bit behind. My apologies. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something, and I will see you all tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic day.